This build is already taking too long. It no longer fits in the screen, so let's get her finished. Let's finish her up and let's get her in the air. First step of joining the rear end to the fuselage should be quite simple. We just need to push everything back through as it was before and screw it all down using 1, 2 and 3 bolts. Top one should be fine because we can reach in through the top. The bottom two are probably going to be a bit more fun. Need long arms for this one. It took some wiggling, it took some jiggling, and it took a long nose screwdriver with a ball end. But we got those 3 bolts in and everything's now ready to go. Nice and tight. Having screwed down the pipe for the first time, it seems to have a bit of wiggle, a bit more than I would like. So I'm going to drill a spare hole there and there, see if we can just get that screw in closer to the edge of the cone, tighter to that, so it's got less play in it. With those 2 extra screws in, that little bit closer, just keeps everything nice and tight, so we've got no unwanted movement in there. Next up, turbine's going in place, and we need to see exactly where to install our smoke injector. Now, this is the one from JetCat, stainless steel. We just need to slice it in there, something like that. I ended up installing it the other way around, as you can see. The curve here wasn't quite right for this turbine and cone. It was much better with the straight end, which, as you can see, now fits right into the back there. So this end, which had been flattened into a sort of injector nozzle, we just had to cut that off, and we've now connected up our fuel line, which goes to our smoke pump. We've tied that off so it can't go anywhere, and we made up this little mount. Now the tube does come with a couple of metal clamps which just screw into place, but due to the gap in where that would have needed to be, I would have had to make a plate just to hold those. So I'd rather just make the plate and tie the tube to it. That's Kevlar tie, Kevlar string basically, a few holes wrapped around tight, knotted into place, and then with some cyano just for some added safety. So that shouldn't be going anywhere. With that said, we've got our turbine basically in place. Servos are now finally connected, ready to go, and we can move on forwards. The turbine we're going to remove one last time. After all, we aren't quite finished and we want to have it be the last thing installed, so there's no risk of it absorbing any kind of dust or wood particles. But we are just going to make sure that the wires, when running forwards, are going to clear our tank, which, as we saw in the previous video, tank's going to go there. Wires are coming somewhere over here, so that's roughly where our ECU is going to go. So we can now continue with the tank, no issues. As mentioned in the previous video, I wasn't a fan of the felt type clunk, so here we have our 2 new fuel lines with our big heavy clunks with nothing behind them. Nice and easy for our pumps to suck through, one for fuel, one for smoke, into the tank, tank into the plane. Overkill? Well, probably yeah. We have 2 Velcro straps, one that goes, comes under, comes back again, and the same at this side, and that way it can stick onto itself. And then we have the 4 cable ties that we mentioned on the wooden supports going into the side rails, just to make sure it can't twist or move forwards or backwards anywhere. We've plumbed in the fuel lines, tied them all down with metal ties, and our fuel system's basically ready to go. Now, next up, we just need to sort out a few wires that come from the back moving forwards, and then we'll be able to put landing gear in. Installing the struts was straightforward. We just insert them into our retract mechanism. There's a bolt that runs side to side there, so just need to tighten that up. Now, doing that from the inside there, well, a little bit of a pain, but easy enough to do. And then there's this secondary screw in there, which also prevents it from being able to twist. Now, we've run down the inside here the brake wire, which runs down there. And then in here, we've just got 1 cable tie. You can just see the head sticking out there. And then all the wires run together with the rest of the wires from the plane heading forwards towards our power box. We've started wrapping them all together. Now, to keep things light and to avoid cable ties and bases and so on, we've just got some electric tape, and that's all been cyanoed to the side of the fuzz. Same applies for our fuel line and our smoke line. Now, it may look a bit chaotic at the moment, but this is when things should start coming together and everything should start fitting in place. I've made this piece of wood which is going to support our ECU. We've measured to make sure that that's the right location distance wise for the wires that come attached to the turbine for the ECU. That's just been epoxied in place. You can see the 3 screw holes which will be holding it there, and then just next to it we've got our breather valves or breather nipples for the overflow of both our fuel, which is the big tube, and our smoke, which is a small tube. Now, to make sure that the pump inside the turbine has no issue in sucking fuel through, I've actually gone for 8mm tubing all the way around the back of the tank before coming all the way to the front again and then connecting to our breather. So we should have no siphoning off of fuel, and with a big 8mm tube we should have no issue of the pump struggling to suck fuel through. Everything else is going to be 6mm. This is the tray that comes with the kit. It looks quite lightweight, it's got lots of holes in it, and conveniently it's already got a cutout for our UAT, so we'll give it a chance. This is where that tray will go. Normally I would be looking to install it further forwards, however, as it's a split fuselage and we want to be able to split it in case we get any nice fun trips and we need to ship the model anywhere, we are going to try it here and hopefully avoid having to use too much weight in the nose or too many big batteries. We're still going to be running the smoke pump up the front, and as much as possible we'll be going forwards to try and avoid the need for any extra weight. And hopefully this is what our tray is going to look like. We've got our cutout for the UAT as we mentioned. We've got our Powerbox Systems Mercury SR2 which is going to be controlling everything, and right next to it we've got our Pilot-RC controller for the brakes and retracts. They're both going to receive the wires through that cutout there. Now, I did have to modify that slightly just because that particular hole was too big and I didn't want to leave just a hole without any reinforcement so that the covering doesn't start peeling back when we start pushing wires through. Now, the reason for that is simply that in installing our Mercury as far forward as possible, same for the controller, hopefully everything further forward means less problems with getting the right CG. With all our wires arriving more or less at the right place and our board in theory finished, this all just slots in here, something like that. Just bear with me, we're doing this one-handed. There we go. So we've got all the wires from one side of the plane coming down the side, going down under, and then coming out to our power box. We've got exactly the same happening over on the other side. They'll be coming up into here as well. And then just over there, as you can see, we've got that board for our ECU, which again will have the wires running down to our power box and then back to our turbine. Now that we've got our Pro interface screwed into the fuzz, you can maybe see why I chose to use that side of the fuselage rather than the other side. That's right, it's got its ports on the top. So whenever we need to connect our GSU, we can take our wire and we can still plug it in to our interface relatively easily, all without needing to use any extenders, adapters or anything that's heavy. And here we have our first glimpse of what our tray should look like. So we've got our UAT more or less in place. Don't pay too much attention to the tubes yet, they still need to be locked down, so those two will go together, that way they're out the way of both sides of the landing gear. We've got all our wires passed through, they just need to be inserted into our power box or retract controller. Once that's sorted, we'll just lock those in place. We need to put one more wire through from our ECU or a Pro interface through to our power box. And then we've got these two tubes here, which are our smoke in from our tank and our smoke out to our injector nozzle, which will be running further forwards to our smoke pump. We just need to run our batteries to our power box, and we're basically done. So I think it's time to actually join the front half onto here and finish up all the wiring. After quite a bit of wiring, we're done. So let's go over it from the back, moving forwards. On the rear hatch, we obviously have our turbine. We already saw our smoke nozzle coming out the back. That's going forwards, along with the turbine wires. They're also going forwards. They're all joining up with the elevator wires on this side, which join up as well with the vector servos. We've got a load of wires going down that side, and then we've got the same at the top going the other way. Obviously less wires because that's just one vector and one elevator. This one here includes the rudder as well. In the center section, we obviously have our fuel tank, which we already saw go in. We've got our turbine feed line going across the top there, wrapped to the tank so that it can't get in the way of where the landing gear is coming in and coming out of. Obviously we don't want anything catching. Then down here we have most of the rear wires coming through. They're coming through to our Turbine RC interface, the Pro interface. That then runs into our power box for signal. And then the rest of the wires just keep going forwards to the power box itself. And finally it's time to close her all up, get her ready for her first trip to the flying field. That's number 1 done, and number 2, and number 3. So this is what our radio bay looks like. We've got our Mercury SR2, we've got our landing gear controller at the back, obviously the switch for the Mercury, the GPS for the gyro, the power box iGyro, and our UAT. The UAT, we've got the fuel lines coming in from the main tank on the top there, and then going out again towards the turbine, all routed through the center there, so they're out of the way of the landing gears on both sides. We've got our JetCat RC interface, the Pro interface here. That runs through into our Mercury as well. We've got the GSU port on the top there, so we can easily connect that if or when needed. We've also got the telemetry data coming out of here, going under our radio bay into here, which Y leads it to one of the receivers just at the top there before going into our power box. So we're getting full telemetry from the power box, from all 3 receivers, and from JetCat as well. Running back from there, on one side we have all of these, which are our battery leads for the turbine, which go into the turbine wires just behind the Pro interface. And we've got 2 Tygon lines, which are our smoke in, so coming from our fuel tank, and our smoke out, coming from our pump, which we've placed all the way at the front here, so as to avoid having to add too much nose weight. Same for the batteries, they're going to be sitting on there. We'll be checking the CG in a moment. And we've got, as our turbine battery is 3S, we've gone for an XT60 connector, and our power box batteries are multiplex, so there's no way to confuse a 2S with a 3S, and hopefully we won't be making anything go pop. And then the batteries from the power box are both running down this side. They're collecting up with the wires that run from the pump, along with the ones for the servo, for the steering, and that landing gear. They all run to the back there. And here we just have our filler line with our tap, just held on with Velcro, so it's easy access. And there she is in all her ginormous glory. Make sure to tune in to the next video where we'll be doing the maiden flight, checking her over, and we'll start having some real fun with her. Hope you've enjoyed the build series. Once we've got her flying right, I'll share with you all the setup as well. So tune in for that one. Subscribe if you aren't already, and we'll see you all in the air.